Welcome to Quick Course Digest. Today, we are diving into a really big topic, critical thinking. And this isn't going to be some dry, heavy philosophical lecture. Not at all. Think of this more like getting a practical toolkit, a set of mental tools to help you make sense of a world that is just constantly throwing information, arguments, and, let's be honest, a whole lot of noise at us. Okay, let's get into it. All right, to get our brains warmed up, I have a quick question for you. Take a look at this little description of Linda. Now, based on that, which of these two scenarios feels more probable to you? A or B? Don't think too hard about it, just what's your first instinct? Got an answer in your head? Great, just hang on to that. We are definitely coming back to this later. So, the very first tool we need in our toolkit is all about deconstruction. It's the ability to break things down. See, before we can even begin to evaluate an argument, we have to know what it is we're looking at. What are the actual parts? What are the fundamental building blocks? This right here gets to the absolute core of all logic. The foundation of any real argument is something called a statement. Now, a statement is simply a sentence that can be either true or false. All alligators are on average larger than crocodiles. That's a statement. We can go check the facts, right? But look at a command, like, don't let any reptiles into the house. That's not a statement. It can't be true or false. It's just an order. This little distinction is absolutely crucial because you simply can't build a logical argument out of things that aren't statements. So once we have our statements, then we can start to build an argument. And in the world of critical thinking, an argument isn't about two people shouting at each other. No, it's a very specific, structured process. You take a series of statements, we call those premises, and you use them as reasons, as evidence, to support another statement, which we call the conclusion. It's all about providing reasons for why something should be believed. And this is a perfect way to see the difference between logic and persuasion. Over on the left, you see a clear, logical argument. Premise 1, I've had the kids all week. Premise 2, I need a break. And that little word so signals the conclusion. You should take them tomorrow. It follows a structure. Now, the example on the right, well, it might be way more persuasive, but it's an emotional plea. It's trying to convince you through feelings of guilt or sympathy, not by laying out a structured case. Both can be really powerful, but only one of them is a logical argument. All right, let's build on that. Because let's be real, the world we live in rarely gives us perfect, complete information. We're almost always working with some level of uncertainty, trying to make the best possible call with the evidence we actually have. And there's a name for this. It's called inductive reasoning. Take this incredible sports story. It's 2004, the American League Championship Series. The Boston Red Sox are down 3-0 against their arch rivals, the New York Yankees. Now, the evidence here was just overwhelming. In the entire history of professional sports, we're talking baseball, basketball, hockey, no team had ever come back from an 0-3 hole to win a 7-game series. I mean, ever. All the data, all the history pointed to one single conclusion. But then, the Red Sox won Game 4, and then they won Game 5, then Game 6, and Game 7. They did what everyone thought was impossible. Now, the conclusion that the Yankees would win was what we call inductively strong. It was by far the most probable outcome. But it wasn't a deductive certainty. There was still a chance, no matter how tiny. And that's the whole point of inductive reasoning. It deals in probabilities, not in absolutes. And this whole story brings us to a really important, kind of technical-sounding word, defeasibility. But the idea is actually super simple. It just means that the conclusion of an inductive argument can be defeated. It can be completely overturned by new information. And this isn't a weakness, it's actually a huge strength. It's how we learn. It's how we adapt our beliefs when the world gives us new evidence. Let's make this super concrete. Here's a classic example. Okay, step 1, Tweety is a bird. Step 2, most birds fly. So what's our conclusion? It's totally reasonable to conclude that Tweety probably flies. Makes sense. But what if I give you one new piece of information? What if I tell you that Tweety is 6 feet tall and can run 30 miles per hour? All of a sudden, our entire conclusion just flips on its head. That new data completely defeats the old conclusion. Now we think Tweety is probably an ostrich and definitely doesn't fly. That's defeasibility in action. Okay, so we know how to analyze arguments coming from other people. But what about the arguments that we have with ourselves? Sometimes the biggest, most stubborn obstacle to thinking clearly is our own brain and all the little shortcuts and biases it just loves to take. Okay, I want you to look at this. This is a real finding from a real study. The counties in the U.S. that have the lowest rates of kidney cancer tend to share these characteristics. So why? Your brain is probably already jumping to conclusions, right? Maybe it's the fresh air, a healthier country lifestyle, less pollution. Our minds are literally wired to search for a cause, to tell a story that connects the dots. So go ahead, what's your hypothesis? What's the narrative that makes sense of these facts? What story is your brain trying to tell you right now about why rural life might lead to lower cancer rates? And now, here's the twist. This is the part that breaks almost all of those neat little stories. The counties with the highest rates of kidney cancer have the exact same profile. They are also mostly rural, sparsely populated, and traditionally Republican. So, what on earth is going on? It can't be about a healthy rural lifestyle if that same factor is also linked to the highest rates. The real answer has nothing to do with lifestyle or clean air or politics. It's pure statistics. Rural counties have small populations, and the law of small numbers tells us that small sample sizes are way more likely to produce extreme results, both high and low. Think about it. In a huge city, the cancer rate will almost always be near the national average. But in a tiny county with just a few hundred people, just one or two chance cases, or a lack of them, can send the rate skyrocketing or plummeting. The key factor wasn't geography. It was just the math of small sample sizes. So let's finally get back to Linda. If you answered B, that it's more probable she's a CEO who also donates to the arts, you are in good company. Most people pick B. But you've just fallen for something called the conjunction fallacy. Your brain made up a compelling story that fit the description. But just think about it with pure probability. Imagine a giant circle of all CEOs. Now imagine a much smaller circle inside of that one labeled CEOs who also donate to the arts. It is always statistically more likely that a person belongs to the bigger group than to the smaller, more specific subgroup inside it. All right, for our final tool, let's wade into what is probably the trickiest territory of all, morality. How can we use the principles of logic to help us navigate questions of right and wrong, where the answers aren't just true or false, but good or bad? Well, for centuries, philosophers have developed frameworks to help us structure these incredibly tough conversations. Utilitarianism is all about the outcome. It asks, what action creates the greatest good for the greatest number? Deontology is focused on rules and duties. It asks, what if everyone on Earth did this exact same thing? And then there's virtue ethics, which shifts the focus entirely. It doesn't ask about actions, it asks about character. What would a truly good, virtuous person do in this situation? Now, it is so important to remember that these are not magic formulas. They do not just spit out easy, clean answers. In fact, a lot of the time, they actually conflict with each other, and that's what creates these incredibly difficult moral dilemmas. Their real purpose isn't to make moral decisions easy, but to make our thinking about them more rigorous, more consistent, and a whole lot clearer. So, there you have it, your starter toolkit for critical thinking. We've got the ability to deconstruct arguments and see how they're built. We have the wisdom to reason with uncertainty when we don't have all the facts. We've got the self-awareness to spot our own mind's mental traps. And we have frameworks to bring some structure to life's toughest moral choices. But this whole journey brings us to a final, really crucial question. In the most difficult decisions you have to make, when the data is incomplete, when you know your own biases are pulling you in one direction, and when the moral stakes are incredibly high, which of these tools will you ultimately trust? The cold, hard structure of logic? The probabilities of the evidence, or the inner compass of your own character? What you decide really defines the kind of thinker you choose to be.